Football fans, picture this. You bet on your favorite player to score the first touchdown, and he throws an awesome block so his teammate can score instead. If this happens, BetMGM wants to give you another chance at the end zone. With BetMGM's second chance promotion, you'll get your stake back if your first touchdown scorer scores second instead. That's right, bet on any pro football player to score the first touchdown of the game. If you're right, you win. If your player scores second, you get your stake back in cash. Everyone knows the most exciting part of football is the score. With BetMGM's second chance promotion, you have a chance to keep the fun going after the first player crosses the goal line. Place a first touchdown score wager today. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only, DC only. Existing customer offer. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards vary. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Our iHeartRadio Music Festival, presented by Capital One, coming back to Las Vegas, September 20th and 21st. A weekend full of superstar performances. A$AP Rocky, Big Sean, Camila Cabello, Doja Cat, Dua Lipa, Gwen Stefani, Halsey, Hozier, Keith Urban, New Kids on the Block, Paramore, Shabuzi, The Black Crowes, The Weeknd, Thomas Rhett, Victoria Monet, Coldplay's Chris Martin, and more. Stream live only on Hulu and get tickets to be there at AXS.com.
My name is Ariel. I moved to the U.S. at 19. I spoke no English and I struggled finding job opportunities. Everything I have, I owe to the Adult Literacy Center and getting my high school diploma at age 22.
It was an honor helping you achieve your greatness. Now you're helping others achieve theirs. It inspires me.
When you graduate, they graduate. Find free and supportive adult education centers near you at finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins. Well, look who we have here. The beautiful podcast listener that you are. You came to listen to conversations with people who are involved in independent music. What a coincidence. All joking aside, thank you for coming to hang out with the show, and specifically with Tim Kasher from Cursive. I am so unbelievably stoked to bring this conversation to you. I was stoked to have the conversation as well. But Tim and Cursive, I mean, I have loved the band for 20 years. Like, I don't know, whenever Domestica came out, which was 2001, 2002, I want to say. And they're just Tim is an incredible writer, not only lyrically, but songwriting wise, like just tongue firmly implanted in cheek, but also really, really sincere, just pouring it all out there. And that's exactly why we like all this music, this weirdo punk, hardcore, indie rock, emo, whatever it is you want to classify it. And Tim is definitely one of those people that has ridden alongside and in it for quite some time. So I was thrilled to have this discussion. And on top of all that, they are releasing a new record on Run for Cover. The record is called Devourer, and it comes out like any moment now. I want to say it comes out, I think the 30th. Yeah, I think in a couple days. But anyways, regardless, you'll be hearing a song as we go into the interview, but the record's spectacular. It's just as good as everything they've done before, if not, dare I say, better. Because, sometimes bands, they just get better with age. And then sometimes bands only release one good record. But fortunately, Cursive, they haven't done that. So anyways, you can subscribe to the podcast here and then also obviously on YouTube as well. I have a link in the show notes. You can follow along there. Also, if you wouldn't mind, this takes maybe 30 seconds of your time. Just hit up the Apple Podcast page, leave a rating and review. I really genuinely do appreciate that. I pay attention to like every single one that comes in. I'm like, oh man, I wish I could give you like a digital high five. And then also leave a star rating on the Spotify page. Those all help in the algorithm, all of that stuff. Just, it works to the advantage of introducing the show to people who might not have heard of it, which is totally fine because realistically, we've got 9 million things coming at us at any given moment. And so when a person actually finds something that they end up liking, oh man, this is incredible. So anyways, all that is good. And on top of good, we have a weekly recommendation segment that we have been doing for this entire year, where basically I want to introduce people to music that I'm tripping across and I'm liking, because I know, like, word of mouth, that's exactly how bands get into your brain, where a friend of yours recommends something or you randomly see it on the internet. Anyways, so there is a link in the show notes that is a Spotify playlist of all the previous recommendations, and this record will also be included. This one might throw people for a loop, and I was reticent to maybe put it in here because I know that it may cause some people to like vomit in their mouths, because they just, the words that I say will be like, oh my gosh, I don't like any of what you're saying. But we'll talk about it. Okay, let's walk through this with me. The band is called Bill Murray. The record is called American Motorsports. It is a full length that came out, I want to say, earlier this year. Frankly, I had been only familiar with Bill Murray and just to spell this out, it's Bilmuri, not Bill Murray, the actor. But obviously you see where the pun and the funniness lies. So I'd been aware of this band because they were kind of involved with the whole like Dance Gavin Dance sort of like prog emo scene or whatever. But then, some of their songs, or some of his songs, it is a band now, but it started off just one dude. But they, stuff got algorithmically delivered to me where I was just like, oh, this is cool. Like, nothing that really blows my hair back, but this record is so catchy. This is basically a gent, DJENT country pop record. And I know those are the words that could trigger people to being like, listen, I am never going to trust your taste in music ever again. And that's completely fine. I totally get it. This record is so good. It is so catchy. It is weird because all of these genres mixed together would be something that I myself would never really find any value in. But there is something that is so earnest and fun and extremely catchy that keeps me revisiting this record. Like, I am literally, I looked up just before I started to record when he is playing in Southern California, because I have to see this. I'm like, I want to see the spectacle that is this gent country pop. It's wild. So anyways, if any of those things sound like even remotely interesting, you should check the record out, because I promise, like, after one or two songs, you might be like, damn, dude, this is pretty good. This is pretty good. And I wouldn't call it a guilty pleasure, even though those, like I said, those are genres of music that I don't typically travel in. But regardless, the record is called American Motorsports. The artist's name is Bill Murray. So anyways, let's talk to Tim from Cursive. Domestica was, a big record for me, and I know many others, as a personal, like a 19-year-old. That was the, the spot that most people can start to identify with, heartbreak. But the idea of, being reflective on those heartbreaks was something that I know resonated with me, and like I said, many others. I realize that, I'm kind of putting you in a time and a place that might be difficult to, look back on. But, after you felt like the record sort of, musically had taken shape, and you obviously were like, okay, I got some broad lyrical themes and what have you, did you, I guess, kind of immediately know to couch this as like, all right, this whole record is obviously about my divorce and about this? Or was it one of those things that, like at the, 11th hour or whatever, you realize like, oh yes, like this is all one thing. So we can kind of wrap this up all together.
Yeah. More of an 11th hour kind of thing, which is how a handful of records I've done kind of turn out to be. That just being that there is a theme and or concepts that are at play that I don't necessarily recognize initially. But then when you kind of lay all the songs out in front of you, kind of you are to recognize, a pattern or a theme or whatever. And Domestica, that was certainly the case. But I was able to finish it. If I recall, I think that we were about probably about 85% there with that record when I recognized that it really was about this couple and what they were going through. And so that was when I was able to finish that last 15% to kind of put a bow on it,
Yeah, absolutely.
Make it all work together a little better.
Right. And I do think, I mean, when you are putting something together, like, a record or a collection of songs, and like you said, they, start to take shape, and then it, sometimes it does reveal itself where it's like, because you're not, I mean, yes, you're viewing this as a whole collective thing, but maybe you're not, thematically looking at it like that. And it isn't until you're at the tail end where it's like, oh yes, this all ties together really well, like a record should, I guess.
No, that's the hope anyway. I mean, it really depends on your personal aesthetic though too, I don't think that's important to a lot of songwriters and a lot of album writers, and that's not a diss at all. That's just a preference,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if you set out with the idea at the very beginning of, you piecing whatever piece of music it is that you're trying, or creative endeavor, at the start, you may have one intention and then clearly have to travel in a lot of other different, follow the muse, as they say.
Sure. Yeah.
Reflecting on you as an individual, I mean, you're the youngest of 6 kids, which is a wild statement just because, very few people have that many, siblings, so to speak. And I know you obviously were the youngest. Was it one of those things where, you were the true baby of the family and, getting away with murder, and, people were, I'm being dramatic here, but, ignoring you, and you had to, wave your arms to be like, hey guys, pay attention to me over here? Or was that not your experience?
It's not so far off. I mean, my family, we would have a laugh at this because we kind of know how it went down. But yeah, the younger siblings, we kind of very loosely have broken the family into 2 halves. Like the first 3 kids that were looked after and maybe doted upon a bit, and then the second 3, which was more of your typical it looks like kids know how to raise themselves, so they're fine,
Right.
So I think it is. I mean, yeah, growing up, I mean, I was often felt hurt by that. I felt neglected, but I also appreciated the independence that it afforded me. I mean, I was a really independent kid as a result, and I'm kind of I don't think I would, even though it was a bit painful, to feel like you didn't know to not feel like you don't know one's parents very well, or felt like you're not being paid attention to, or, I think it also makes you who you are. And I like who I am. So it's all good.
Right. And I think that experience, whether you're an only child or whether, you're the youngest of the group, it is that self-sufficient nature of like, well, I'm going to, have to either take care of myself or entertain myself, or I'm left to my own devices. They do give you that I mean, you're not going to articulate this as a kid, but that freedom to be like, oh, I can kind of, do this and, not have to ask permission or whatever.
Yeah. And it was nice. Especially when, like, by the time I got to be, an early teenager, what a kind of dream, really. What a gift to seemingly not have parents,
Right.
I was able, I kind of just did what I wanted to. It was a common joke amongst my friends that I didn't actually have parents. So.
Right. It was one of those things like, Tim, are you going home tonight, or are you just going to spend the night here again? You're like, I don't know. Whatever. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, kind of.
That's amazing. And so because of that, what sort of kid would you, I guess, typify yourself as? Like, were you one of those outdoor kids, that was running around and, getting into trouble in the neighborhood? Or were you a sports person? Were you an indoor kid? What's the, I mean, obviously there's a lot of options there, but yeah. Where would you put yourself?
That first example was probably pretty good. I mean, we were really, and so, Matt McGinn, who's in Cursive, we grew up together. We grew up like in the same neighborhood. So we did all of our running around together, but really very adventurous, I'd say. We couldn't wait to, we got bikes, and bikes helped us to get out into the city and out into different parts of the city and just get away from home. And it wasn't even necessarily so much about getting away from home as it was just get out and see the world. And then couldn't wait to get cars, and so we could start getting out further. And I do think that all was the earliest incarnation of the desire to want to tour, to have a band and go out to play other cities.
Right. Yeah. That idea of being able to experience things outside of your radius, whatever that may mean, whether that's, your neighborhood or whether that's, the city next door. It's like the world opens up in a pretty quick way when you start to think about it like that.
Yeah. And that was incredibly important to us. More and more, this is probably neither here nor there, but I find it fascinating that so many of, peers of so many of us adults now who have children, how often I hear that their children don't want to learn how to drive or don't really want to go out, or, just the different attitude for just a different way of growing up for youth these days, that there seems to be a popular trend to just want to stay home because you kind of already have everything at your not even proverbial fingertips, just your actual fingertips.
No, I think you've articulated not only an interesting trend, but one that many people have constantly pointed to, where the countdown to a driver's license was so incredibly important to people, of the generation of whatever, we'll say 35 and under as it stands right now in 2024. And now it's like, yeah, there's just eventually I'll get a license. Like, I got Uber or whatever. Like I got other things to take me places.
Yeah. It just seems so wild to me. Independence was and is so important to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And where were you, I presume finding, friends at school and everything like that. And would you consider yourself, a social being, or were you one of those people that, you had a really, really tight group of friends and that was, all you really kind of interacted with?
I kind of have run different both of those, or I come from a social family, so I'm good at being social. I know how to be social and affable, but I'm also introverted. But as my spouse puts it, and I think she's right, is that I'm an introverted extrovert, I think, or is it an extroverted introvert? Maybe it's an extrovert. Anyway, I definitely thrive off of. I thrive off of being alone, but I'm great. But I'm happy being with others too. So,
right.
I don't need others. I actually kind of need to be alone.
Sure. Well, I think that, that spectrum of, introvert, extrovert, and I think most people, lie somewhere towards the middle of the spectrum, where it's like, even if you're this most, extroverted person, you need that space. And sometimes it's the self-awareness of understanding that, like, oh, maybe I'm always tired because I'm always trying to be like on, and this person that's, so affable. And it's like, yeah, do you ever chill out by yourself? Maybe that's good.
Yeah. When you put it out too, it's like, that makes so much sense to me. I do get exhausted. I get so exhausted if I'm on, if you have to be on for an entire day.
Right, totally. And especially, what you do in regards to your creative pursuits, whether it's screenwriting, singing in a band, like all that stuff, there is so much of the quote unquote on time that it's like, okay, I'm done playing, performing, whatever that may mean. Like, please leave me alone for a minute. In a good way, Omaha is obviously a very, the cradle of America, as it were, as far as the center point. What makes Omaha special to you, besides just the fact that you grew up there and you had experiences there, and obviously cut a lot of your musical teeth there? Now that you've lived in a lot of different places, what do you reflect on in regards to Omaha?
I guess that you growing up, it felt like such it felt like such a setback for us that we were that the scene was so small and insular, and we didn't really have we had very few inroads, to other scenes, like in other cities. Other cities just really weren't that close. Kansas City was 3 hours away. Des Moines was like 2 hours away, but then I don't know. We never really had much of a connection there. But that seemed like kind of a disability growing up. But now, as we reflect back on it, I think there was something kind of special. There's certainly something special about that. I think it's such a different experience to be raised in making music and like making your own music in this bubble, pre-internet as well, where there was just no. It was really hard to imagine how you're going to get out. Whereas if we had been raised even just in Chicago, but it's certainly on the coasts. I mean, it's such a different experience. It's such a different experience to be a New York band, and you know that when you go out and play certain venues, that it's like, well, yeah, there might be people from Rough Trade there, or just anything. There's in Omaha, there just wasn't that at all, and I think that's a good thing. I think it kept the music. It kept integrity in the music, honesty in the music. I'd like to believe. There were factions of bands growing up in the music scene. There was kind of all of us that were just doing a variation of whatever we were doing in the punk rock scene, and then there were other bands that we kind of considered. I would consider them like the bar band scene. And you could tell that they were trying to piece their music together in a way to allure, major labels or some kind of bigger commercial success. And I always found that to be a shame because it felt so much less authentic as a result. But also, like, who are you appealing to?
Right.
No one out here. But I should mention, and I think this is endlessly interesting to certain people anyway, that we did have 311 in our scene growing up.
Yeah, I had Nick on the show. I mean, this was a couple, and yeah, like and that's what I find so fascinating about those particular areas where it's just like, the idea that 311's first show was with Fugazi is just like, that breaks people's brains that are
totally
familiar with the scene. And so, yeah, but to your point, like just that idea of like, Omaha is located centrally to all of these cities that, have some semblance of culture. It's not like you're so far removed. So because of that fact, you were all able to exist in your own vacuums, but then, get a little experience from these other people from different towns and start to, piece together the weirdo scene that, was and still continues to be Omaha.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. So 311 is, 311, I do think that those bar bands of which I spoke, like, and that's such a generalization I'm saying, but like just to call them that scene, the bar band scene, I think they were really inspired by 311. And I don't think that's negative or anything like that. 311 did offer this, what could look like a path out, a route to find national success. We just didn't see it that way. I'll speak for myself. 311 was just such an anomaly. I didn't think that I didn't see them as developing a path forward for me, and that wasn't for disliking or anything like that. It was just kind of like 311. Actually, I would say if anything, it was out of respect for 311, because I've always said, and I will continue to say, that those dudes know how to write a song, man. Like, oh yeah, like we could tell when we were teenagers, it's like these guys know how to write, like they know how to put a song together. And I still hear it. They're just, whether you like it or not, it's like they're very good at what they do. And so that was such a different, so to me, even though they were part of our scene, they kind of also weren't in my head. They were just like, oh no, they're just a totally other thing. They're just they're just on a different level altogether,
Merch. That's all you hear me talking about. Like, actually, there's many times where I've thought of like starting a, podcast or a chat YouTube show or whatever about merch. And I stopped myself because I'm like, listen, I already am doing way too much for myself. But that is where rockabilia.com. You knew I was going to talk about them because they are an incredibly loyal sponsor of this show. And they give you all rad officially licensed band merch that you can get a 10% discount on. So use the promo code 100 words or less. Go to rockabilia.com, load up your cart, use that promo code, and then boom, 10% off. You're saying its praises, saying the company's praises for weeks / months / years to come. And I don't care if you're into, Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, or if you're into, Billie Eilish, whatever style of music you like, they have something for you there. I promise you that. And they also do these really cool limited edition collaborations with bands. And then they do theme months. They do a lot of cool things. So at the very least, go to their website, sign up for their mailing list, and you will be able to get cool dispatches from them. It ships from the Midwest here in the United States of America. And they have great customer service in case you run into any issues. Because, the Postal Service, like as much as I personally love them, there are times where mistakes are made. And Rockabilia makes sure that you are ultimately satisfied with your purchase. So go to rockabilia.com. 100 words or less is the promo code. Use number 100 words or less. And then boom, 10% off. Thank you, Rockabilia. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. You know what it's like. When you're a kid, all of a sudden, stuff's getting shoved in your brain, whether it's like school, I got to learn how to tie my shoes, or learning a language, or all of these things that we do. And then, the Peter Pan quote always comes to my mind when they're talking about growing up, like, don't grow up, it's a trap. And granted, there's, traps that exist, whether it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm too busy, I can't do anything. And, oh my gosh, like I really only think about, work or whatever. Stop. Just take a moment for yourself and explore that curiosity, explore that with a third party. And that is why BetterHelp, I just love therapy personally. And I think BetterHelp is such an incredible option for people to dip into that is all online. It's incredibly easy to access for people. And on top of that, if you are curious about therapy, there is no better way than to sign up using my promo code, of course. So go to betterhelp.com/Ray and you will get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Ray. I wholeheartedly advocate for therapy and ignite that curiosity with someone else being like, hey, how do I carve time? How do I strategize? And then boom, your therapist is like, how about you do these things? And it's like, oh my gosh, you've just unlocked all this stuff in my brain. Now I'm going to put it in action. So go to betterhelp.com/Ray and get 10% off your first month now.
Football fans, picture this. You bet on your favorite player to score the first touchdown, and he throws an awesome block so his teammate can score instead. If this happens, BetMGM wants to give you another chance at the end zone. With BetMGM's second chance promotion, you'll get your stake back if your first touchdown scorer scores second instead. That's right, bet on any pro football player to score the first touchdown of the game. If you're right, you win. If your player scores second, you get your stake back in cash. Everyone knows the most exciting part of football is the score. With BetMGM's second chance promotion, you have a chance to keep the fun going after the first player crosses the goal line. Place a first touchdown scorer wager today. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only, DC only. Existing customer offer. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards vary. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
We are the boy band. Your tween made you see. We are the boy band. It's Painful Concert number 3. We are the boy band. We're 5 and 19. We are the boy band. Always singing on key.
You love your kids enough to take them to see their favorite band. Love them enough to make sure they're buckled up in the back seat. Show them you love them. Keep them safe. Visit nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Our iHeartRadio Music Festival, presented by Capital One, coming back to Las Vegas. 2 nights, September 20th and 21st, on one stage. Stream live only on Hulu. A weekend full of superstar performances, never seen before collaborations, and once-in-a-lifetime artist moments you'll have to see to believe. Tickets are on sale now at AXS.com. Don't miss A$AP Rocky, Big Sean, Camila Cabello, Doja Cat, Dua Lipa, Gwen Stefani, Halsey, Hozier, Keith Urban, New Kids on the Block, Paramore, Shabuzi, The Black Crowes, The Weeknd, Thomas Rhett, Victoria Monet, a special performance by Coldplay's Chris Martin, and more. Get your tickets to be there now at AXS.com.
To your point of the idea of, whatever, getting out and, making something of your music, clearly from the, punk, hardcore, indie rock scene, like that was never, even though, we collectively existed in the, post Nirvana phase, still that was never a notion to be like, oh yes, like clearly me in Cursive is going to follow the path of 311. Like you're like, no, that's never going to happen. So we'll do our own thing, whatever that may mean.
I would like to offer in closing on the 311 subject too, that my little anecdote of my variation of the 311 opening for Fugazi's tale is that was the first day. That was the first day I had ever heard of Fugazi. I was at a friend's house and we were listening to Fugazi 7 Inches, and I just fell flat on my face in love with Fugazi, immediately. The reason we're listening to the 7 Inches is because they were playing that night, and we tried so hard. We couldn't even drive yet. So we tried so hard. We called everyone we knew, everyone's older brothers and sisters, to try to get a ride to that show, but we couldn't get there.
Right. I love that. Something somewhat of a tangent, but related, the idea that I know you've mentioned in other interviews and discussions you've had that you would have been an English teacher if music didn't, these are my words, not yours, didn't swallow you whole. What sort of, I guess, grade level expectations that you had of, go, like, did you want to teach high school, university? Like, where were you at in regards to, your desire on that sort of thing?
Sure. As far as that daydream is concerned.
Yes, exactly.
I think I would have fought to be a college professor. Fought as in, I think I would have wanted to work. I would have wanted to work to get some sort of master's, some kind of post-grad work to position myself in, because I know that I would want to be in a community where I could feel like I was hanging out with mostly like-minded people that wanted to be there, and wanted to learn and wanted to talk about literature together. That would be my preference. And then from there, I'd probably just go down, and if it couldn't have been college, I guess high school. And if it couldn't be high school, I guess it'd be grade school. But at that point, that's just not as much of where my interests lie as much.
Right. And I'm guessing because of that, would you consider yourself a, studious person? Like, did you get okay grades, or did you, really just focus on the, English literature aspect and everything else kind of fell by the wayside?
Yeah, more like that. I am a bright enough person, I guess. I could have gotten better grades. I just didn't have a ton of interest in, the sciences and mathematics. But I loved all of my English in literature, in writing. So I excelled in all the fields of which I'm interested in, I guess.
Right. Which I love that as a kid, when you get to that point in your schooling life where you realize oh wait, here's the things I like. I'm only going to pay attention to these in school, and everything, it's you have this wildly different, oh yeah, I'm getting D's in math, and then I'm getting A+ in AP English or whatever.
in some ways, it seems kind of just like how a person's brain works too. Like I can't memorize these algebraic equations because they're so boring, because they're so dull to me.
Right.
But then another person will be the opposite.
Right. Exactly. You're like, don't have me solve for X, but would you like me to tell you about the first 100 pages of Infinite Jest? Absolutely. When you started playing music and, becoming interested in the more independent side of things, how did you get intro to that? Because I know Omaha has obviously had, its history within like punk and hardcore and everything like that, bands coming through. But how did you get exposed to, bands that were obviously not on the radio or introduced to you via your older siblings?
We had, excuse me. Really, I think we all just feel endlessly proud of Omaha's music scene, even as small as it was and kind of continues to be. Excuse me. There's just so much. It's just a cool. Whatever. I'm from Omaha, so of course I'm biased.
Yes.
But it's incredibly cool music scene, was then and it is now. Cool bands continue to crop up. I think there's just. It's where I'm from. So it's the attitude. I like the attitude and the approach to music that Nebraskans generally do. We had our minds, exploded, at a young age when we discovered that there was, this burgeoning, indie scene in Omaha in Lincoln and around Nebraska. And that would have been when we were, I guess 15, 16 years old or something like that. And we had our band and we were out there doing it. But yeah, so there were bands like Mercy Rule and Mousetrap and Sideshow, Opium Taylor, that were just really cool bands that were all not even really that much older, like a little older than us. But, when you're a teenager, that makes all the difference.
Yep.
They had a couple years, a few years on us, and were just doing insane shit. They showed us like, yeah, you can, cause we started, I think it's pretty boilerplate the way we started being a band, in Omaha, Nebraska. It was ambitious enough that we wanted to do that as teenagers, but we did the typical thing where even though we were writing original songs, but we learned covers and played covers to play the high school dances and stuff like that.
I was expecting you to say talent show, but you did the dances. So like you had to pull like a full set out of cover songs.
Yeah, and we had a lot of songs, and it was great though too. The proms and the dances and the bonfires and all that, the homecomings, they were pretty gracious about what we were up to, which was, like playing Joy Division and Ramones, and just kind of, Smiths, Cure. They were into it. They're just like, okay, yeah, they're the alternative cover band,
Right. We'll have the the pop music playing, but then when we need something that's is slightly askew, like we'll obviously tap Tim's shoulder in his band.
It's something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Did because the typical nature of the way that our social stratification is structured, was your band looked as I presume that this was some iteration of Slow Down Virginia at the beginning, the cover band. So were you looked at quizzically, or was it kind of like, oh, like this is okay, this is tolerable?
We were really pretty young, and when we were first starting, I'm sure there was just a lot of probably laughing and snickering behind, while we were doing it. But, sure. But I think that our actual peers in our grade, I think they were, I think there was a little bit of that awe of like, whoa, did you guys all learn your instruments and figure out a bunch of cover songs to play this homecoming? It's like, there's a certain ambition to doing it. We ended up with a weird little following the way that you do, just because it was kind of, just kids being kids. being, like the popular kids were into what we're doing. And so we were just kind of rode that. But really, we were just saving money to go into the studio to record our own stuff.
Right. And how were your parents reacting to the stuff that you were getting into, clearly the left of center things, the things that they most likely did not understand? Were they just permissive? I mean, they were obviously permissive enough for you to play in bands and everything, but were they just like, oh, Tim's headed down a real slippery slope here. We don't understand what he's doing.
I don't, again, back to our start of the conversation, I don't think they were really privy to what I was up to for the most part.
Sure. They didn't even know you were playing music.
Yeah, I think they just saw, like, in the lump general sense, like, oh, look at, like he's really into music and he's taking a lot of initiative, and I'm sure they just saw that as a positive thing,
Right, something he's interested in. So let's let him continue to do that and not put down the let the other shoe drop and try to say that he can't play music anymore or whatever.
Yeah, no, they only said the way that we would ever butt heads was just they were insistent about me going to college, and there were times where I was more interested in music than college. But I'm glad that they pushed me because I liked college. So
right. When you first started to play and perform, were you? I mean, I know most people, there's that element of like, this feels weird, like I'm going to play with my back to the crowd and that sort of stuff. But, were you comfortable performing on stage and singing and stuff like that? Or was that a learning process?
Yeah, I think I guess I was always okay with it. Part of the extroverted side of me, and even what you're asking about, I do think there's such truth to, that notion that if you kind of, a lot of entertainers are born of, like maybe upbringings where they feel like they have to yell, they have to be louder to be heard, or, you kind of have to learn, like you have to learn your song and dance to get some attention. Yeah. I think that probably doing music and getting on stage was just an extension of that for me.
Right. And as you started to, get out in the world in regards to, going to college and obviously forming, Cursive and starting to, sign a record deal and like the business aspect of the band, like even if, business, I'm using in air quotes, of getting paid $100 to play a show, like, did you like that element of the industry, or was that just kind of a necessary evil that you had to learn how to, kind of deal with and navigate?
It's one of the great relationships of my life is my friendship with Matt. Again, like we grew up, our first photos together were like when we were 2 years old, but really we were basically born. We were born 3 weeks apart or 2 weeks apart, in the same neighborhood. And then we both decided to learn. I learned guitar, he learned bass. But also while I was becoming a songwriter, he didn't have as much inspiration in that side into the songwriting side of things, but he was really encouraging and supportive about my songwriting, and it was something that we always saw as like, yeah, I'll write some songs and we'll work on them together. What I'm getting at is that he is very business minded, and so it's really been a myriad reasons why it's such an important relationship for us. But one of them being is just like we're really a good fit for one another. Because he's been basically managing and kind of keeping business up for me for as long as we've been doing this.
Right. No, that's good that you had the, yin to your yang, so to speak, because I do think that sometimes, especially in bands, and it always seems to default to the singer of being like, oh, that's the person in front, so they're probably, the business person or whatever. And it's like, some people are thrust into that really have no business dealing with that, or they don't want to. And then it just kind of, really poisons that relationship where it's like, I don't trust anybody outside the band or whatever. And it becomes really, really difficult.
Yeah. Matt won't really take credit for this, but I I personally believe that I wouldn't still be doing this if it weren't for him. I think that he's just so good at just kind of at managing and just kind of keeping things afloat in ways that I just I just wouldn't have done, you know. So it's I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, that's good. You got to have that collaborative relationship because, you know, both things will pull each other forward, not only creatively, but then, you know, business wise and the proverbial getting out of the garage, so to speak.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And touring has clearly played a huge part in your life, and you've spent a lot of time on the road in a lot of, you know, shapes and sizes. When you were touring most actively with, you know, Cursive in the whatever mid-aughts, as it were, did you immediately take to being on the road, or was that something that you also had to like learn how to manage and, you know, be able to try to balance as much home life while you were on the road and vice versa?
Right. I think that's such an interesting question, and I imagine a lot of touring people. I think there's so many different answers, right? The way I see it is, the way I remember it anyway, is I certainly early on, there was just nothing more exciting than just the prospect of getting to get out and tour and getting to play shows in different cities. But once we, you know, really were able to unlock that and then we're invited out to do it all the time, it became overwhelming. And I got to a place kind of in the early aughts where I was doing it all the time and was really starting to resent it because it wasn't about writing. It's about being it's like entertaining. And it's like, what am I, an entertainer? You know, it's first and foremost, I just always want to be a writer. And so I felt like I was kind of losing that by focusing too much just on the entertainment, on the I shouldn't use the word entertainment, but the you know, the performance of it,
the stage show.
Yeah. But that didn't stop it from happening, and I kept, you know, barreling through year after year doing it. But what I'm so fortunate, or what I really appreciate is that I really had an about face for that whole, as far as concerning my attitude about stage, about performance. And I'm so glad, because it's such a, I don't know. Now I look back, I'm like, oh, it's so rotten to think that I used to be so kind of bitter and resentful about playing live, performing live, because it seemed to me now it just seems like it's such a gift. And also for people who really know me, I really am like a ham, and I really do want to take stage. You know, like I want to. When I'm just in a group of people, there's oftentimes I just kind of want to just hold court if I can, you know. It's something I really enjoy doing, and I've been doing it for so many years that I've really kind of learned my way of doing it, and I enjoy it. So now I really look forward to shows. Yeah,
and that's great to be able to, through your experience, have the perspective where it's like, I mean, the saying I know always personally rings in my head of, you know, youth is wasted on the young, of just that idea that it's like, oh my gosh, yes. Like, you know, even though we all experience, you know, shows to 3 people in, you know, Montreal or whatever, it still is that experience of just like, you know, you feel like you're on a pirate on a pirate ship, and like this whole experience is weird. And, you know, very few people experience that. And even for all of the, you know, licks you take out in the road, to your point, the idea that you can still just literally perform your songs in front of people, no matter how few there might be at certain points, it still is a special thing.
Yeah, I really agree. And it's good to, yeah, I also appreciate the humility that I've, you know, earned over the course of so many years, that I've discovered how to be happy and to give 100% when you are in front of 20 people.
I love convenience. I mean, we all love convenience, right? Whether it's like, you know, I got to order all of this stuff from like 15 different websites. How about you go to evilgreed.net and you check out their web stores. So from bands and record labels that all fall under the cool, heavy artistic stuff. Like that's how I like to describe the type of bands and record labels they work with, because they don't blow open the doors for everybody. They work with a curated list, stuff that you were into, whether it's Flat Spot Records, Triple B, all the cool hardcore stuff. Or if you're into a band like Brutus and Sargent House and like all the artistic metal stuff. They have so much great stuff that I know you as a listener of this podcast would absolutely love and enjoy. They ship out of Berlin, Germany, but don't let that scare you off here in the United States, because the shipping rates to us are very cheap, all things considered. I mean, if you're ordering just like a sticker from them, like don't do that, calm down. But if you're ordering, a few pieces of merch, like maybe some vinyl, it's going to be really, really cost effective for you to do that. And like I said, they work with a very curated list of bands, and their Instagram is awesome because they throw out these questions on there where they're like, hey, what's the, the loudest band you've ever heard or whatever. And, yes, of course, that's like engagement fodder, but it's also really interesting because then you can look at the comments and then be like, oh, wow, I didn't even think about that band being really loud, or just inspires you to think about music in a different way. So I love Evil Greed and what they do. So you need to go check out their website, evilgreed.net, shop to your heart's content, order a bunch of stuff, and then, you're going to show up on your back to school. How about back to school? You're going to wear your cool band shirt to, second period English or whatever. Oh man, you're going to be the talk of the town, or the talk of, maybe like the weirdos that are into subculture at your particular school. You get it. That was me. I was a weirdo at my, at my school, wearing my stripe shirt or whatever. Anyways, evilgreed.net. Enjoy.
Football fans, picture this. You bet on your favorite player to score the first touchdown, and he throws an awesome block so his teammate can score instead. If this happens, BetMGM wants to give you another chance at the end zone. With BetMGM's second chance promotion, you'll get your stake back if your first touchdown scorer scores second instead. That's right, bet on any pro football player to score the first touchdown of the game. If you're right, you win. If your player scores second, you get your stake back in cash. Everyone knows the most exciting part of football is the score. With BetMGM's second chance promotion, you have a chance to keep the fun going after the first player crosses the goal line. Place a first touchdown score wager today. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only, DC only. Existing customer offer. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards vary. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
It's 4 a.m., Monday, and you're literally sucking baby snot through a tube because she's congested. Man, that's love. And if you love her that much, love her enough to make sure she's buckled in the right car seat. To make sure your child's in the right seat for their age and size, visit nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Show them you love them. Keep them safe. Visit nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Our iHeartRadio Music Festival, presented by Capital One, coming back to Las Vegas. 2 nights, September 20th and 21st, on one stage. Stream live only on Hulu. A weekend full of superstar performances, never seen before collaborations, and once-in-a-lifetime artist moments you'll have to see to believe. Tickets are on sale now at AXS.com. Don't miss A$AP Rocky, Big Sean, Camila Cabello, Doja Cat, Dua Lipa, Gwen Stefani, Halsey, Hozier, Keith Urban, New Kids on the Block, Paramore, Shabuzi, The Black Crowes, The Weeknd, Thomas Rhett, Victoria Monet, a special performance by Coldplay's Chris Martin, and more. Get your tickets to be there now at AXS.com.
And to that point too, the idea that you as a musician and an artist, haven't been complacent, where you've continued to put out music in, different iterations, whether it's your solo project or obviously new Cursive music. And it would be a different thing if you were like, every 2 years you were celebrating the anniversary of the Ugly Organ. They're like, all right, here's our 13th anniversary. And like, there are times to celebrate that. But if you haven't done anything, then I think that would feel like you are just, being this, sideshow to what it is people can be as artists, like actually progressing as opposed to just stuck in nostalgia.
Yeah, and for us, we found a balance that we personally like, where it took a long time for us to decide whether or not we would ever, do album play tours. It's a tough decision to make, and like kind of like, what kind of artist are you? What does it mean? It also, you get really hung up on the people's perception, because there is kind of that ugly perception of people thinking that it's a cash grab, to just kind of like wallow in nostalgia or what have you, but we found a balance that we're currently really happy with, where we did an Ugly Organ tour about a decade ago. We did a Domestica tour a couple years ago. They bring it turns out to just be such a great night where everyone kind of comes together for, like-minded sense, to celebrate a part of their lives that they miss, or that they want to think about, that they want to, reflect upon. But also, in a much more simpler sense, I kind of started thinking about it as, what if your younger self in the year 2000, what if I were to say that in 2022 you're gonna be invited to play this album from front to back around the country? It would just be the biggest, it's the hugest honor. I wouldn't be able to fathom that concept, Right. So I feel very thankful that people want to hear something that we've done, that they want to hear it front to back. That's actually a huge compliment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And with that ugly Oregon era of the band, it was so interesting to watch Cursive, because I'm coming at it from the perspective, punk hardcore kid, vegan straight edge, like played metallic hardcore bands and stuff, but appreciated obviously all of the nuances of our beautiful scene at large, and so got into Cursive and many of the other bands and peers. But what I found interesting was that Cursive was this what I like to call a band's band, where people enjoy touring with you because you obviously, people are like, I legitimately love Cursive, and of course I'd like to take them out. And so whether we're a hardcore band or whether we're a slow, sad indie rock band, like, you guys had a lot of different weird, when I use weird in air quotes, touring experiences, like going out with the Blood Brothers and then also going out with the Cure. Was it, I presume it was fun for you to dabble in all of these different scenes, so to speak, because you were getting to play with, to a lot of different people, or was it a game of kind of whiplash where it was like, oh, okay, like, we kind of have to, figure out how to approach this crowd much different than we did, a couple months ago when we did this other tour?
Yeah, I don't have a tour popping in my head right now for Cursive that was, awful, or felt like, oh God, we're out of our league or out of our element. But there's some wild ones that we've been out with. But it was always so cool. The one that was initially the most daunting was opening for Mastodon. Was doing a Mastodon tour. But
yeah, that's you got that was that with Against Me and Planes Mistaken for Stars, or no?
Yeah, Planes was on some of it. These Arms Are Snakes were on some of it, but Against Me was on the whole thing, I believe.
Yeah, that I could understand what that experience would be weird.
So, as you recall, Mastodon had like a really good footing in the indie rock scene. They're kind of like that unique metal band that had the crossover appeal, and they wanted to do a really eclectic. It was their idea to do an eclectic tour. How cool! I can't believe I did a tour opening for Mastodon. Is awesome. It's just like such a cool thing to get to do. I love Mastodon. But I was nervous about it. And I do remember the first night was I'm pretty sure the first night was Wiltern in LA. And there was this great big guy, just kind of like in the middle of the crowd audience. And he just stood there, with his middle fingers up in the air at me the entire set. But whenever I'd make eye contact with him, he was really kind. He would just give me a smile that was his smile kind of just said like, you get it. You know, like I'm here to see Mastodon. I'm not gonna like you. And I was like, all right, man, you're okay. But that was the way that tour started. So I was like, oh shit, we're in over our heads. But that was the last time. That was the last time anything like that happened. So
Yeah, no, that's cool. I distinctly remembered that show. That tour left my brain, but at the time I was working with Planes Mistaken for Stars and I helped put out that Mercy record. And I remember that show so vividly because I was like, this was such a wild bill, but it worked so perfectly where it was like everybody was generally, like, the crowd was generally cool with every single band, even though, like sonically there was such a wide gulf there. But to your point, just like everybody was like, oh yeah, like I like all this music. Of course I do. Yeah. That's funny. Looking at your move in regards to, coming to Los Angeles and starting to, work on screenwriting and obviously a lot of the creative disciplines that are, behind the scenes for getting stuff stood up from an entertainment industry. Usually people obviously do that, earlier in their lives in regards to like, all right, I'm fresh from college and I'm going to go, take on Tinseltown or whatever, insert cliche here. Was it interesting for you to kind of come to the industry later because you had this, creative experience that people, most likely were just like, wait, so you played in an indie rock band for a long time and now you want to be a screenwriter? Was it, do you feel like you were, I guess, better equipped for the rejection that happens within Hollywood, or was it still just as daunting?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to put it. I think that, yeah, I mean, I've built up my tough skin, like over so many years of doing this. I would have liked to have gotten into screenwriting and into some form of filmmaking at a much younger age, but I had the great, absolute, totally unique benefit of having success in music at an early age, where I just kind of had to keep chasing that for a while. So I kept chasing it until I turned 30, and that's when I gave myself a real ultimatum of like, hey man, in this one life that you have, you really wanted to get into filmmaking, and if you don't start now, you're never really going to do it, and I don't want you to regret any of the decisions you made. So I really dove pretty heavy into screenwriting then, and so now I've been doing it for nearly 20 years now. It's a hard fucking business for sure,
Yeah.
But I think it's really enriching, and it actually was a benefit for me to do the music side first, do music stuff first, because it's just been it's afforded me just more open doors, just people kind of curious what I'm up to. It's really been helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember another connective point. Like I've worked in the podcast industry, past 10 years and various companies. And I remember Greta Cohn, we worked together, and it was really funny because like I, had obviously watched you play with her. And so, like we met, and it was one of those things where I just, pulled her to the side and I was like, yeah, I've seen you in Cursive many times. And then, but it just makes me think of what you're talking about, where it's like, you never know where your art gets put out in the world, and people who you randomly may have met, in Hollywood be like, I mean, I'm sure it doesn't happen all the time, but some people are just like, oh yeah. I like the Cursive, or I like the Good Life. And you're like, oh, that's good. I would never have had that discussion if I wasn't here at this very particular point.
It continues to, and this is not just humility, but it continues to floor me whenever I'm working with people in these different industries, and they actually know who I am or what I do. It's just like, oh my gosh, wow, thank you.
Yeah, you're like I'm flattered. Do I get the job? Is that cool?
I know. It's just, music is. The industry is so huge.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much music out there.
Totally. Yeah. That it's like, why, pay attention to, little old me, so to speak. So I get that. Going back to the ham nature of what you were talking about, on stage, like you've always definitely had, I mean, every time I've seen you, and then every time that, you express yourself in a humorous way, your tongue is firmly planted in your cheek, where it's just like, okay, don't take what I'm saying too seriously. Has that kind of like run its course through your entire life? Like, I presume that you do that in your, whatever, quote unquote, private / personal life. Has that sense of humor always been pervasive?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I mean,
Sure.
I think I'm probably just considered to be a real piece of shit smartass for the most part, and yeah, it comes out in lyrics quite a bit. That's, that's all right. I sometimes worry that, it's kind of tough when you're, especially with lyrics writing and with music, in song, to be sarcastic and, to have your tongue planted firmly in your cheek. That people don't recognize it. They don't see it, and then they misconstrue things. And that's too bad. All I can say is just like, that's too bad, but you just got to keep trying to write it the way that you believe it should be written. So.
Right. Absolutely. The fact that, you are not only still, creating and obviously care about, music and your creative output, typically, like most quote unquote normal people, like grow out of that, like, oh, I've moved on. I mean, you are a lifer by any stretch of the imagination, but, what keeps you, I guess, compelled to continue to either create on your own with your own solo endeavors, or then obviously, with Cursive, being able to, write new music and obviously put out, like, I mean, you don't have to do that. Like, you could just like put out one song every couple of years, but it's like, oh no, like I feel compelled to do this. What keeps you, I guess, going back to that well, so to speak?
Well, I mean, maybe in the most base terms, in the most base sense, it's still just really exciting, like really just like on that most pure level. And if it weren't, that would be really startling for me. But I would confront that. I would confront it with the same level of integrity. Like I would confront not writing music with the same level of integrity as I confront writing music, if that makes sense. I wouldn't. I would hope. I hope to believe. I hope I'm right in saying that I wouldn't fake it or do it because I felt like it was just part of your job or something like that. No, I just feel lucky that I'm still just very excited about it. Right now I miss writing so badly, just because I've been so busy with just kind of I've just been in post with the projects that I'm on right now. So I just can't wait.
Right.
So as long as I keep feeling like that, then it's easy in that sense,
Yeah, absolutely. The last two things I wanted to hit on, one was actually related to what you're talking about, like because you exist in two, different creative disciplines. Do you feel like one informs the other, or is it like just, activating different parts of your brain and your disciplines to be able to, focus on these things? Because sometimes people, especially with creative work, like code switching is hard, where it's like, okay, I'm doing this thing and like, this is what I'm focused on. And then, in the back of your brain, you're like, oh, here's a good song or whatever. Like, is it easy for you to, I guess, kind of switch between the two?
Yeah, I just think of them as pretty significantly different things. And I don't know what my approach is to either. So I think you're talking about kind of like songwriting and screenwriting. Is this right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, they're just, to me, they're significantly different. So there's not a lot of collision there for me. I will say that I do. For filmmaking, I'm so young at it still. Like it's such a new thing for me still. But for the I'm finishing. One of the things I'm finishing my second feature right now, and I insist on doing the majority of music for these movies because I love music, because that's where I come from. I'm a musician and a songwriter, But I do wonder if that's not something that I'm going to have to reckon with at some point. If I'm so lucky that I'm afforded the ability to continue making films, which is at this point totally up in the air, I do wonder if I have to come to terms with like using my music, or should you use the best music? But
Right.
and it's just hard for me. I think that the answer is, hey, I'm sorry, but I have to make my music the best music. My music has to make sense. Cause I don't want to let go of it if I don't have to. But I don't know. I really don't know. But I don't know if that didn't really quite answer your question, but I would say that to me in my head, that's where music and screenwriting in filmmaking have such a major crossover, is the music that is involved in filmmaking. And that is such a different muscle, I think. When I write music, I want it to take center stage. And so I struggle with writing score where it's supposed to complement something else.
Right. Totally. It's a massively different discipline, to your point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I recognize that it's not easy for me, and it's not easy for me because I'm excitable. And if I'm writing music that I like, I kind of want to push everything else out of the way and be like, hey, everyone, listen to this, when actually you're writing it to be in the background for some other event that's happening. And that's a different, like I say, that's a different muscle that I need to understand better.
Right. And I mean, it's like you look at obviously people like, Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross, and like Clint Mansell, and like all these people that have, come from the band world, but then have made this successful adaptation. And like, yes, you can see elements of their DNA in the scores that they create. But to your point, it's like, clearly not going to be, the center stage. It's like, oh yeah, this is going to, like you said, complement the visuals here. That's exactly the point of what it is that we're doing here.
Yeah. And that's tough. I really like to follow in the footsteps of the great John Carpenter, who managed to do so much of his own score work.
And it's so, I think it's so charming to watch him. I mean, he would hate the word charming attached to him, but just the idea of like him creating music with his son and touring and just like that, it's very enviable, the fact that he was producing all of these films and then being like, oh yeah, like I'm just going to handle the score, guys. Don't worry about it. It'll be cheaper. And then it's like, it's the most iconic stuff ever. And you're just like, wow. So I guess that's how you can do it.
I know. I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. The last thing, just the idea of interacting with, new music and bands and, still, because I'm sure there are many elements of, newer bands that have clearly been, using Cursive as a reference point and all that sort of stuff, which is, of course, flattering for you. But, how do you interact with new music, broadly speaking? Is it one of those things that you are pretty selective and very aware of how selective you are, or is it still, kind of like a gushing fire hose?
I'm still really excited about, I don't know that I've changed. Well, no, I have changed. I was gonna say, I don't know if I've changed much about as far as my like appreciation for music, but, that's not true. I do recognize that getting older, as we could become older and we kind of become dulled. I fight that. I just combat it, and I remind myself to keep looking for new music and keep finding stuff. It's like chasing that dragon to find stuff to get excited about. But I'm different. I'm different than I was when I was 22, because when I was 22, it was so easy. Everything was, I was just so crazy excited about all this music coming out all the time. And I am still excited. I'm still always finding new music. But probably just not on that. I probably only like take on about, a far smaller percentage of music than I used to when I was 22. But I'm still actively, chasing it down.
Right. Yeah, your music taste. I mean, everybody's music taste calcifies to a certain extent, but not to the point of where it's, that purest point where it's like, there's nothing that's been more, real than, 1985 Chicago or whatever. It's like, no, like there's still stuff that's happening. You just maybe aren't paying attention to it as closely as you were at one point.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this is what I've been thinking about just recently. Because I've been, I've been thinking about new records that I find that I think are really strong, but I'll think to myself, yeah, but I mean, that's really strong, but I mean, it's not Pixies Doolittle, right? Or it's like, it's not U2 War or, whatever, Violent Femmes first record, whatever is like this really seminal, important record to you in your life. And as I think about it more, it's just like, no, actually, Tim, I think you're wrong. I think, like, for me, I think that like Military Gun's last record is like basically like a modern masterpiece. I think Mannequin Pussy just put out an incredible record. I think that that Mannequin Pussy record, how about Turnstile? Like that, yeah. That's actually an easier example. That Glow On, is that what it's called? Yeah. That record, for a generation it is Pixies Doolittle. Like that's song, right. The songs on Glow On are going to be iconic songs for a huge generation of young people for the rest of their lives, and more so than Doolittle than for a lot of them. It's just absolutely the thing that we don't really get anymore is that I don't get to. It is hard, and this is what's kind of sad about getting older, is that as much as I've fallen in love with that Military Gun record, or like Fontaine's DC, great fucking band. As much as I fell in love with Skinty Fia, I'll never really be able to hear it the way that I could have if I could have been 22 when I would have heard it. It would have altered my life, and it would have changed the trajectory of my life in certain ways. And I think at my age, that's just not going to happen. But what I can do is I can appreciate it on a really profound level.
Absolutely. Totally. It's all about the context in which you're consuming it and the age and how these things are going to hit you. And to your point, those records are going to be, iconic in years moving forward. But it just, it hits people at different ages, and you can still appreciate it, but it's tough to have that, first look at the, Tootsie Pop or whatever. It's like, you only get that once, but music can still hit you in very meaningful ways. And you can recognize, to your point, that excitement that will exist around certain records. You're like, oh yeah, I get it. I feel it. I feel it differently than you, but I still feel it.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Well, Tim, I appreciate you. I appreciate your musical output, and thanks for being a great human being on this chat. And now you can go back to being terrible, so it's good.
Yeah, no, thanks for such a pleasant conversation.
How about Tim from Cursive? Just a great dude, and it's been cool to watch him, be able to take his stab at the other arts in regards to screenwriting, working in Hollywood. It's been really cool. And I appreciate him, and I appreciate Amanda, his publicist, for bringing the idea to me, because it's just, Tim has always been on the list, but then there's just been no reason for me to randomly punish him on Instagram or whatever. And so anyways, anytime these requests come in, I'm like, I don't need to be pitched. I love Cursive. Let's go. So anyways, shout out to both of them. And next week we have a conversation that was very, very grateful to have. His name is John Lulo. Sorry. He played in a band called Down to Earth Approach, put out multiple records on Vagrant. And then he released a podcast alongside of some of his bandmates and a close friend of the band called Even If It Kills Me. So Down to Earth Approach was never a big band. Like, they, put out some records, they made an impact, some people cared about what they did. I personally never really followed along with what they did. I was like, okay, that's just, a band. Like, I've heard their name and their music is okay. It's kind of, hot rod circuit adjacent. But this podcast, it was a 6-part miniseries that they did that documented the band's, life, brush against, quote unquote stardom in regards to doing Warped Tour and all that stuff. But it was an incredibly important portrait of what I define most band experiences are. Like bands that obviously don't, break through in any real huge way, but they do make an impact to the people who care about them. So anyways, John sang and played guitar in that band, and I had him on the show because I think this is a really good document of what many of us experience, including myself, because the band that I played in was never that large, but it was large enough to be able to do a bunch of cool stuff. And like that is really a point of pride, I think, for myself and many others. So anyways, John from Down to Earth Approach is on next week. And until then, please be safe, everybody.
This podcast is supported by BetterHelp, offering licensed therapists you can connect with via video, phone, or chat. Here's BetterHelp Head of Clinical Operations, Hessu Joe, discussing who can benefit from therapy.
I think a lot of people think that you're supposed to be going to therapy once you're like having panic attacks every day. But before you get to that point, I think once you start even noticing that you feel a little bit off and you can't maintain this harmony that you once had in relationships, that could be a sign that maybe you want to go talk to somebody. There's always a benefit in talking to someone because we can all benefit from improved insight about ourselves and who we are and how we behave with other people. So if you're human, that's like a good indicator that you could benefit from talking to somebody.
Find out if therapy is right for you. Visit BetterHelp.com today. That's BetterHelp.com.
Our iHeartRadio Music Festival, presented by Capital One, coming back to Las Vegas, September 20th and 21st. A weekend full of superstar performances. A$AP Rocky, Big Sean, Camila Cabello, Doja Cat, Dua Lipa, Gwen Stefani, Halsey, Hozier, Keith Urban, New Kids on the Block, Paramore, Shabuzi, The Black Crowes, The Weeknd, Thomas Rhett, Victoria Monet, Coldplay's Chris Martin, and more. Stream live only on Hulu and get tickets to be there at AXS.com.
Smokey the Bear.
Then you know why Smokey tells you when he sees you passing through. Remember, please be careful, it's the least that you can do.
It's what you decide. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
After 80 years of learning his wildfire prevention tips, Smokey Bear lives within us all. Learn more at SmokeyBear.com. And remember,
only you can prevent wildfires.
Brought to you by the USDA Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.